Hello and welcome. Today, we'll be going over and discussing reading. Specifically, we'll talk about storytelling as well as answering questions and how to do so. We'll go over a lot of techniques. Let's get started. So today, first, we'll talk about why reading is important. Then, we'll go over storytelling in English, as well as storytelling techniques in general. Then, we'll discuss reading and the steps to follow. And finally, we'll do a little sample practice together to make sure we understand. Let's go ahead and get started. So firstly, let's talk about why reading is important. Well, first of all, we can relate new things to things we already know. We can also learn about other people's cultures as well as attitudes towards one another. We can also share experiences with one another, and it can help develop our own thinking skills. In general, books are quite interesting. They're enjoyable and very fun to read. And sometimes it's really helpful for our imagination and our growth. So, how do stories help us? What do we learn from stories? Well, they help us become aware of specific structures, as well as introducing new language and context and other ideas to the reader. It also helps with intonation and pronunciation of words, especially for a language we're learning. We practice other skills as well, and we enjoy practicing in English or any other language that you're learning. This can help you acquire the language unconsciously, and it's a little bit effortless. Now, let's discuss storytelling, what it is and why it's important. When we tell stories, it's important to speak spontaneously or naturally in the way that we would if we were telling a story to our friends or family. You can use your face and body as well as posture and gestures to help you explain a story. It's also important to use your natural intonation. Now, keep in mind that this might differ based on your mother tongue. So when we're telling a story in English, it's important to use the intonation we use in English. Now, what happens when you're reading a story? Well, when you read a story, you don't have to necessarily learn the story. You also don't necessarily have to worry about your English. You can just read and enjoy. It's important to also stop and talk about what's happening or going on, especially with friends that you might be reading with or a group. You can stop and show pictures and discuss specific parts of the text. This will help you throughout your reading process. You're doing really well so far. If you're ready, let's go ahead and move on to the steps to follow in storytelling. When you're choosing a story, first of all, it's most important to choose a story that you like and find enjoyable. It's important to choose a story that you feel that you can tell well, and a story that might be appealing or interesting to your audience and others. It's important to choose a story that is also easy to understand and doesn't have too long or too descriptive of texts or passages. And lastly, it can be helpful to choose a story that has illustrations. Now, let's talk about specific techniques you can use to remember a story. First of all, make sure that you read or listen to it a few times before trying to retell it. Make sure that you write out a few of the major important key points. This is called a story skeleton. Make sure that the points you write are written down in bubbles, and you can help yourself by remembering the specific characteristics or personality traits of the characters you read about. Now let's talk about how you can prepare an environment to tell a story. First of all, you have to be in the right mindset to tell a story. This means that you can change the seating with what works best for you. You can also change the arrangement of chairs, tables, boards, and other props. It can also be helpful to use items such as puppets, music, or anything else to help you tell your story. It can be useful to also write on the board, story time, and you can have other people's attention by looking at them directly and shifting your focus from person to person. Now keep in mind, it's really important to be aware of your face and body as well as others when telling a story. Use your face and body for appropriate gestures, and you can act as your characters that you're referring to in your story. When you tell a story, you can look directly at the people involved and the people that you're speaking to. You can even involve them if it makes sense. Now, be prepared to explain some questions or important phrases or keywords that might be unknown or interesting to your audience. Also, prepare to recast answers or questions in English if they're given to you in another language. Now, at the end of the story, it's very useful to always ask questions to your audience. This could be opinions such as, why do you think, or why do you believe? But you could also ask specific things. For example, who sang the beautiful song, or who ate the specific food? Go ahead and pause the video. Take a look at some of the sample questions on your screen. When you're ready, you can move on. So in today's lesson, we discussed reading, specifically storytelling and how to answer questions after a storytelling. We discussed why reading is important, as well as various techniques that you can use and what to keep in mind when telling a story. Lastly, we talked about a few practice questions that you can ask your audience when you're done. When you're ready, you can move on to the next lesson, and we'll see you there.